Welcome back to Gaffer Salon. I'm John Roach. I'm a gaffer here in New York City, and today we're going to take a first look at the Nanlux 150C. Now, I don't have all the accessories. I just have the reflector dish, and it's literally just come in my hand. There's a new firmware that's coming out, so I'm not going to dive too much into color metrics. This is always what happens when a new light comes out. There's a flurry of firmware updates and fixes and so forth, and that's true of all the brands. So for first look, I'm going to give you some general numbers. And we're going to really, I think it's important to look at this 150C from what's come before, and because so many of us have owned or used these Nanlite 60Cs. They came out back in the summer of 2022, so I've had 6 of these now going on 3 years. And in all honesty, it's one of my biggest renting lights. But it's a light that has a lot of compromises. It's not perfect. There are a number of issues with it. And it was aimed more to that mid to lower tier market, not the episodic feature TV people. Those folks are going to use a Filex G3 that costs 3 times the price of this. So compromises, right? You didn't have the best queuing capability, right? If you were on CRMX, you're trying to do queues, you can maybe get by. If you had some simple queues, it might work, but it was not the most robust and or queuable light. Luckily for me, I didn't tend to do a lot of queuing. The few occasions I did, I was able to make it work, but that was not one of its strong points. The build quality, a little plasticky, not the best. It was no IP rating, 0 IP rating. The fit, the finish, a lot of plastic. The projection was actually quite good. I think it was the first RGB ACL light that Nanlite ever did. Nanlux didn't even have one yet. It was a bit of a surprise launching as an RGB ACL. Everything they had previously done was RGB WW. And the fact that it was so small, the cob was really small, so it's getting closer to a point source bulb. So it tended to optically perform really well with the projection. And simultaneously, we're shooting at lower and lower foot candles, right? So I've often found myself with this setup on a doc interview or a corporate thing, never above 50%. And a light, for me, like a light like the 60C is a background special. It's what in the old days we'd use a dado or a dado and a projector or an Airy 150 with doors and black wrap. So now I had the capability of having the full spectrum, a full color light, with these various accessories, which for a background special is essential. So having the blades, having the gobos on a projector with a couple lenses, having the Fresnel with doors, all that part was really excellent. But the color accuracy, the menu system, the buttons, again, a series of compromises. So when we bump up to the 150C, the very first thing in this new line of lights by Nanlux to talk about is the change in their color science. So originally RGB ACL here, we saw Nanlux, the 900C, another great RGB ACL light, but now they've decided they're moving their whole color system to what they're calling the Nebula C8 color engine. So that's essentially taking RGB ACL, the 6 emitters of RGB ACL, and adding 2 additional emitters. So they've added an indigo and they've added a deep red emitter. So the indigo is helping fill in that lower part of the spectrum, and the red obviously is helping with skin tones and so forth. So I'm not going to talk a lot about color metrics, but I'll give you just, we could talk about SSI, which I don't think regardless of firm change would shift. To give you a rough idea, the 60C had mediocre daylight SSI scores in the low 70s, roughly 70 to 72 daylight SSI, and you had a TM30 score of about 93/100. So as we move to the new Nanlux 150C, we're looking at a SSI daylight score of about 80, 79 to 80, and a TM30 of 96/100. So we're seeing significant improvements in the spectrum and in the quality of the light. So let's take a closer look at the head itself, and we'll look at all the various improvements and things they've done. One thing I want to point out straight away, and the thing that I absolutely love, is they've moved to an all-in-one head design, meaning you no longer have a little dangling power supply or separate ballast. Everything is in the head. All you have is an AC cable or a DC cable. That's it. So to me, that's a huge improvement. If we look just as an example, we'll take a look at the Aperture 80C as a size comparison. So it's a little bigger than the 80C. Obviously, we're 80 watts and 150 watts. But the 80C did have the necessity to put on a power brick. Just like with the 60C, you had to mount your power brick here and plug it into the back of the light. And, you know, to me, it was just an annoyance. This, I would have preferred to have a bigger 80C head and have it be all in one. It's not a slight on Aperture. I own 4 of these. I use them all the time. I love them. But I do think in this kind of light, really, really smart. They went with the magnesium alloy. They've really done everything they can to keep the weight down and the size as compact as possible. Yes, it's a bump up in size, but I think for 150, this is a really nice size. And to give you just a sense, this configuration right here with the old unit, both of these are the same exact projector, roughly about 6 pounds here, roughly about 9 pounds here. So as you can see, I have the same old Nanlite projection mounted on the new light. These are both FM, they call them FM mounts, right? It's like a mini Bowens mount essentially in the Nanlux brand. So the projection is cross compatible. If you decide you want to maybe move into the 150s, you got a bunch of the old projections, you don't immediately want to spend the money for the new projections, you could certainly use them. Now the Fresnel is not cross compatible. It literally will not mount in the new front of this head. All the other accessories like a softbox, whatever, those would be cross compatible. So to give you an example, relative to output, if you move the old projector to the new head, you get about 50% more output. Now you might expect it should be double. I was kind of expecting it to be closer to double, but I'm guessing this is, you know, it's not optically designed for this new light. When I was in China back in January with Luke Servald and Andrew Locke, we were shown the prototypes of all these fixtures. I saw the projection, which looked fantastic. It has a rotating barrel, unlike the original. It's a little heavier for sure, but I think it's going to be optically more efficient. Jury's out, I don't have it yet, but I would expect it's going to perform better both optically and better in terms of just raw output. Now, if you look at a comparison of the reflector dishes, the standard little mini 45-degree reflector dish that came with the 60C and the larger 45 standard reflector dish for the new light, you do get double the output. It is almost exactly double the output. So I want to go through all the different features on the head. We're not going to dive into the menu system today, but I want to look at, you know, all the improvements. And I really feel like when I saw this in China, I couldn't wait to get it. I felt like they literally went through my personal checklist of all the issues and problems I was having on complaints about the 60C and solved them. So kudos to Nanlux. I really feel like they nailed this. Of course, I just got it. I haven't had it on set. I don't have all the accessories. You know, the devil's often in the details, but this is a really promising start. So let's start with the 45-degree reflector dish. Significant improvement over the 60C. That was just a tiny little reflector dish. This is a lot more robustly built. It's significantly larger. It's going to be a lot more optically efficient. It's got a lockdown on the front. I'm assuming that's for barn doors, little safety. And they've also gone back and redesigned the locking system, both on the 150 and on the big brother, the 600C. So very much like ProLite first started on the Orion ProLite 675, they had that locking collar system. Aperture then moved it over, migrated it to their 1200X, 1000C, 80C, etc. You've got this locking collar, and then you've got a release button here. I believe Nanlux is calling it their Posi Tight system. So when you remove and loosen the collar here, you've got a secondary release to actually get it off. And so as was typical on the 60C, that was all you had. And so you had some jankiness, you had some play in that. So the collar just gives you a true positive lock. It just pulls this together. Really important for something like a projection. And you'll also notice that there is a modifier recognition, which is true on all the stuff for the 2400 and 1200B Most of these manufacturers are moving to this modifier recognition, which just allows the light to recognize what modifier is on and then make any subtle corrections that might be necessary. For example, a shift in green or magenta, or a subtle shift in Kelvin. Or on the bigger lights, you might be putting on an accessory that can't run at 100%, so the light will recognize it and know it needs to limit it to 50% output or what have you. Now, what's interesting on the 150, I discovered, if I put the older Nanlite 60C projection on this, it fires up and works straight away. Whereas on the larger lights, usually if you put something that doesn't have modifier recognition, it won't function. And you have to dive into the menu and go to modifier recognition and turn that off. That doesn't seem to be the case on the 150. I don't know at this point if that is just true with the 150C or that's just something that was going to be implemented in a future firmware update. But for now, you don't have to be concerned about putting on an older modifier that doesn't have modifier recognition. So that locking system is fantastic. And again, the yoke. They've redesigned this yoke completely. It is a much more beefy, much more well-made system, as you would expect. They've migrated this whole concept of the quick release. So that's really nice. They've got nice degree markings here. The yoke itself is now angled, which of course allows you to get a better tilt. If you got a softbox, certain accessories on, you can get a better tilt. So in addition, you can see that the yoke itself is much deeper, which means if you have a DC power cable or an AC power cable, you can fully pass the yoke. You're not stuck and having to remove your cable and then reattach it on the other side of the yoke. So that's really smart. And of course, as we said, you can quickly release do a quick release and remove the yoke. So in situations where you have a car rig or some specialty rig and the yoke's not going to be the right tool, you have 3 ¼ mounting points. You've got one here, you've got one mirrored on the other side, and you got one dead center in the rear here. So you can screw in your baby pins or other mounting hardware and rig this without the yoke. So that's really great. In addition, it's just beefier all around. You've got a true sort of metal combo, either a junior or a baby receiver. On the 60C, you just had a sort of plasticky baby receiver, and it wouldn't work in a 2K stud. So that all has been a fantastic thing. On the other side of the yoke, you can see you have a V-mount for your battery. It comes with what I have dangling here right now, which is the DC D-tap connector to your battery. The 60C only worked on 14.4 batteries. This is actually dual voltage. You can use 14.4 or you can use 26-volt batteries. So that's a significant improvement. Fan noise, things like that, kind of non-issues on these smaller lights, and that's true on this light. You can barely hear it. I can barely hear it on the 60C. We won't dive in to talk too much about the menus. I'm not even going to fire this up. Andrew Locke will do his usual deep dive review. It's always a problem when lights first come out because the firmware, I just got a new firmware and I'm expecting another firmware. So it's not really fair, I don't feel, to the manufacturers to start posting color metrics numbers because as they are launching, there's a series of rapid progressions of firmware, true of every manufacturer. So, it's not really fair to post numbers now and in a week they're going to be different. So it's, in my book, it's best to let that kind of dust settle and then start to publish real color metrics, figures, and how well the light holds Kelvin temperatures, for example, when it's dimmed down, how much green and magenta shift. That's all sometimes the calibration that gets tweaked as lights come out and firmware improvements come. But suffice it to say, it's a similar menu system to the 900C. The tactile buttons are very similar. It's very similar build quality, for example, to the 900C or any of the other larger Evoke cob lights. You have your usual suspects, of course. You've got your CCT, you've got XY, you've got RGB mode, you've got HSI mode, you've got your full standard kind of range of special effects, etc. And you just have a much more robust, deeper menu. This light is aimed not just at this sort of lower tier, but it's aimed at the feature episodic TV folks. There are accessories on a small light like this. You don't see 5-pin DMX. So there's an accessory little mount point that comes actually when you buy the light, and you can buy an accessory mount, a dual in-out DMX 5-pin, or you can mount an Ethernet connected through the rear. And then you can be up and running on wired DMX or LAN protocols. And of course, you have all those menu options, those sophisticated networking options that you need on bigger shows. And there's some nice touches. You know, when you think about the Nanlite 60C, everything in the menu was pretty basic. It was fan on and fan off. That was it. But at least you had some fan control. But in a Nanlux, in a Pro product, you're going to have the usual suspects of a smart mode or an auto mode. You're going to have a high fan, you're going to have a low fan, you're going to have a standby fan, you're going to have an off, that sort of thing. They've got some other nice menu options. For example, if you want, you can move to 0.1 dimming increments. You can have that across the whole intensity range, or I think more smartly, they're giving you the option to just implement that below 10%, which really is where it makes sense, right? If you're down at 2, 3, 4%, that granular 0.1% intensity adjustment is really going to come into play. It's not going to make much difference when you're up at 80 or 90%. So that's really fantastic. So, you know, all in all, I think everything about this light, the magnesium alloy, the size for a 150 is like spot on for me. So I can't wait. Really want to migrate from the 60Cs. They served me well. I made a lot of money on them. They rented all the time. But this is kind of the next step up, and it solves all the issues that I was seeing on the 60C. I was chatting with Andrew Locke a little bit this morning via Messenger. He just got virtually all the accessories arrived in his shop, and so he's been pulling them out and playing with them. And so we do have quite a bit of an line of accessories here. We have the 2 standard reflector dishes. We have both a motorized and a DMX controlled Fresnel. So if you wanted a motorized DMX Fresnel, you could have that. You can have a more simple, just manual Fresnel. You've got the standard projection. Of course, the old one does work on this, but the new one will have the fully rotating barrel. I think it's going to be optically a lot more efficient. There's also a zoom projection. And then in addition to that, there's going to be a parallel beam accessory. That'll be also for the 600. So there'll be, I believe, 2 different size ones. A little more compact one for this, a larger one for the 600. And of course, they have the giant one for the 2400. Or the 1200B. Then you have a new range of some soft boxes, and there's a little sort of diffused dome that you can put on here, so it just gives you kind of almost like a mini China ball. So that's really interesting. So lots of great accessories in development, or things even like a motorized yoke. That wouldn't be something I would use, but I think, again, feature people or people doing image-based lighting or in volume studios, that kind of stuff could come in really handy. So I think they nailed it. I'm curious to hear what people think about this. I'm always interested in what my colleagues feel and how they're reacting to this light versus other lights. And again, you know, lots of discussion in the forums back on Gaffer's Salon. If you don't know, this YouTube channel really comes out of the Facebook community user group called Gaffer's Salon. If you don't know about us, you can go to Facebook, search for Gaffer's Salon. You'll find us, answer a couple of questions, and you're in. And it's just a wonderful community. I started it about 4 years ago. It's grown now to 6,500 people, literally all over the world. We've got gaffers, yes, but we also have electrics. We have programmers. We have students. We have a lot of DPs. We have grips. I don't know who invited them, but apparently we have grips. Anyway, we'd love to have you. Thanks for watching, and hope to see you in Salon and maybe catch you on set.